What's up everyone, Darcblade here with a patch information video for Resident Evil Resistance. This is regarding patch 1.06, which was released today, the 12th of June 2020. Now it's not the biggest patch out there, but it does add a few new bits of content in the form of new maps, new equipment and new cosmetics. But on top of that, the reason I'm interested in the patch is the balance changes that come with it. There have been numerous changes to the various characters and masterminds in the game, and I'm interested to see if this balances out the experience a little bit. I may have my hopes set too high in regards to this, as this balance patch may have come too late, as unfortunately the Resident Evil Resistance player base seems to be dwindling quite quickly. But anyway, let's get into this video. First of all, we'll go over the new features that came with patch 1.06. First of all is the new map known as Prison. The setting of the prison map was a prison that was owned by Umbrella as a secret bioweapons testing ground. Its hallways devoid of life after the outbreak. Those unable to escape in time now wander its hallways. Now, I must confess I haven't had much time to play on this map barring private games, as it doesn't come up too often for me personally. But a new map is welcome and spices things up a little bit. Next up are new pieces of equipment, both for the survivors and masterminds. Now there are too much to go into details here, but these include things like being able to resist infection for the survivors, or making things more difficult for survivors to escape traps and such. Next up, they've added various new cosmetics. These include new skins for the weapons, survivors, and mastermind zombies. Some are definitely quite outlandish. But anyway, that's about it for the new content that came with patch 1.06. Let's move on to the more interesting aspects, which are adjustments and bug fixes. This is where pretty much all the balance adjustments to the game have come into play. Now we're going to go through these as quickly as possible, but there is a lot to get through, so bear with me if I drone on a little bit. So first of all, in regards to the adjustments and bug fixes, are general survivor adjustments. First of all, they've widened the damage drop-off spectrum when a survivor attacks a distant biocore with firearms. This is when you're attacking those red canisters in the last areas. Now the damage drop-off means that they shouldn't be able to take them out from exceedingly long range. Next up, Capcom reduced the amount of time for which survivors are immobilized after the following actions. This includes being hit by an immobilizing round from a mastermind's camera, being released from a leg hold trap, having a finisher performed, and recovering from a defeated state. So a little bit of a buff to survivors in that regard. They also reduced the damage dealt by the ATM-4 when attacking biocores. This is the rocket launcher, so again another nerf to the survivors in regards to the biocores. They also increased the cost of repair kits, so a nerf to melee survivors there. They've reduced the cost of ammo when you're buying the 50 pack. They've also reduced the cost of the W870, which is the shotgun, as well as reduced the cost of the Lightning Hawk. They've also increased the damage of the MQ-11, LE5 and W870 when attacking cameras. These are the submachine gun assault rifle and again the shotgun. So a buff in regards to buying those weapons from the stores, as well as the damage when attacking cameras. They also increased the damage of the chemical flamethrower, as well as increased the base damage of the MQ-11 and LE5. So more buffs in regards to damage output via weaponry. Survivors also will no longer activate traps when disabling security devices, and when it comes to hand grenades, flash grenades and Molotov cocktails, these can now all be thrown without the need to ready your weapon, so you can basically just throw the weapon without having to aim first. Finally, in regards to the general survivor adjustments, when a melee weapon is equipped, the number of repair kits in your inventory will be now displayed on screen, so you can keep an eye on them. So that's about it for the general survivor adjustments. We're now moving on to individual or specific character adjustments. First of all is Samuel. There's been two changes to this survivor. First of all, they reduced the recovery potential of Fist of Iron's Immortal variant and reduced the duration of the Dash Punch's Recover variant. So ultimately nerfing his survival potential and health recovery when using these variants. Next up for Martin, only one change, which is a buff, which they've increased his maximum health. Moving on to Tyrone, they've adjusted the Determination's Resilience variant to continue recovery until Tyrone's health has reached the fine state. So a little bit of a buff for the tank there. Next up, moving on to Valerie, there's only one nerf here, which they've reduced her maximum health. Moving on to Becca, there's been a few changes to her here. First of all, they've adjusted the amount of ammo dropped when using the Scavenger's Precision variant. They didn't specify if this was a nerf or a buff, to be honest, in that, but it's probably going to be a nerf given the state Becca is in at the moment. They've also adjusted the cooldown times of each Bulletstorm variant. I'm assuming this is a nerf. And then finally, the Bulletstorm's duration will be reduced by 1 additional second if the ATM4 is equipped, so when she's using the rocket launcher. So she shouldn't be able to spam the rocket launcher as much as she could prior to this patch. And then finally, the last of the survivors is Jill. They've only made one change to her, which is they've reduced the damage dealt by the Star's Armory rocket launcher variant when attacking biocores. So they've really reduced the damage output and capabilities of destroying biocores for the survivors unless they're really close to them. But that's about it for the survivors. Let's move on to talk about the general Mastermind adjustments. First of all, they've widened the damage drop-off spectrum when attacking a distant target. This is pretty much in regards to camera damage. So the further the survivor is away from the camera, the less damage you'll do. Next up, infectious creatures no longer increase survivors' infection by a greater amount than standard creatures when physically attacking survivors. So a little bit of a nerf to infection builds there, unfortunately. Next up, Capcom added a minimum activation time required to activate traps via the Environmental Interactive System, the EIS. Next up, they reduced the damage of the high caliber rifle and turret rifle cards, so a nerf to camera weaponry there. They've also reduced the potency of the Enhancer Energy Leech skill card, so again another nerf for the Masterminds. They added a limit on how much bioenergy can be stored by the Enhancer Energy Leech skill card at one time. They've also reduced the speed of both the zombie dogs and lickers that have been affected by the Berserker effects. So nerfing this buff when it comes to creatures, unfortunately. They also reduced the effect of the large caliber barrel equipment, as well as reduced its equipment point cost. Capcom also reduced the damage boosting effect of the gyroscope equipment, as well as reducing its point cost again. Next up, in a change to specifically the casino map, which is they've removed the security guard zombie spawn location closest to the survivor's start point in area 2 of the casino. Next up, controlled zombies will no longer suffer knockback effects when another creature collides with them. Personally, I never experienced this, but that sounds amusing. Also, screen effects from January's skill will now be shown even on disabled cameras, so you know which ones have been affected by January's skills. And finally, in regards to general Mastermind adjustments, they reduced the rate at which the bioenergy recovers while manually controlling a camera-mounted firearm. So those are all the general changes to the Masterminds. We're going to now move on to specific Mastermind changes and adjustments. Now there's a few of them here, but seeing as there's only 5 Masterminds, we should get through them quite quickly. First of all, for Annette, there's only been one change to her, which they've reduced the G Birkin hitbox when passing through doors. This should stop people from door looping the bioweapon. Next, moving on to Daniel. Now we've got multiple buffs to the Tyrant. First of all, they removed the cooldown of the Tyrant's Pulverize ability. The Tyrant can now pass through doors whilst using Hook Punch and Pulverize. The Tyrant will no longer automatically punch upon hitting a wall while using the Bull Rush ability, and they reduced the Tyrant's hitbox when passing through doors. They also increased the speed at which the Tyrant can pass through said doors, and the Tyrant's stagger animation will no longer reset unnaturally when a second flash effect is triggered partway through the animation. So buffs across the board to the Tyrant bioweapon. They also increased the effect of the Equilibrium mod exclusive card for Daniel. Next, moving on to Alex. Now there's been a fair few buffs here, especially to the Yatevo, her bioweapon, which was sorely needed. First of all, survivors will now move more slowly when in close proximity to Yatevo. They also removed the cooldown from Yatevo's Devour ability. They also reduced the time required for Yatevo's Slime Shot buds to regrow, and they shortened the cooldown for Yatevo's Reel In ability when its vines latch onto a survivor. They also increased the bioweapon's resilience to weapon attacks and made it more difficult to stun, and that's about it for the buffs to Alex's bioweapon. There are 2 more adjustments. First of all, they increased the cost reduction effect of the efficiency mod infection exclusive card, and they also reduced the discard cost of the infection efficiency mod too. Next up, moving on to Spencer, only 2 changes and adjustments here. First of all, they reduced the space required to place the disintegration field, and they've adjusted the colours used when attempting to place the disintegration field to make it easier to judge possible placement. So a little bit of a buff to Spencer's ultimate ability there. And then finally with Nikolai, all his changes are to do with the Nemesis. First of all, they've reduced Nemesis's hitbox when passing through doors. The Nemesis can now also perform the jab cross when passing through doors. And finally, the Nemesis stagger animation will no longer reset unnaturally when a second flash effect is triggered partway through the animation. So the survivors can't really stun lock Nemesis and Tyrant anymore. So that's about it for the changes to the Masterminds. Obviously a few nerfs here, but mostly buffs in regards to the Masterminds. So hopefully this will balance things out. So let's move on to the final section, which are system adjustments. First of all, when activating multiple traps at once, track and mine durations will no longer be reduced. Survivors' weapons will now be separated into melee weapons and firearms in the customization screen. Survivors who have been disconnected from the game will now have an X displayed over their face on the left side of the screen, so you can easily indicate people who rage quit. Equipment with a cost exceeding the remaining amount of equipment points will now show a red icon on them. Also, an icon will now be displayed if there is a newly acquired skin when you're customizing your survivors and masterminds. Capcom also added a wall to all areas of the map which prevents creatures from entering the survivor's starting area. This is because certain zones in certain maps allowed creatures to get into the starting zone of the survivors and start dealing damage straight away before they were ready. Survivors will also now immediately proceed to the next area if they are standing in an unlocked exit when the overtime clock begins. Survivors will also now be credited for any progress towards the daily missions when they are removed from a game due to a mastermind disconnecting. So they can easily get their dailies done even if the mastermind rage quits on them. The mastermind players will now be penalised when disconnecting from a match for any reason whatsoever, and survivors will also now be automatically kicked from a game and penalised if they remain inactive in the starting area for a certain amount of time. These are two peeves I had with the game that I'm glad to see now have consequences. Next up, matchmaking will now be temporarily disabled if a player is penalised a certain number of times in a short period. Capcom have also added indicators to the character select screen to show whether any players are using RP boosters. Survivors can also no longer rescue other defeated survivors while standing inside the final exit, which is an odd choice to be honest. It seems like you have to go outside of the final exit to actually resurrect them. Also, some difficult to reach item spawn locations have been adjusted, but they haven't specified what these are. And then finally, Capcom made changes to the default gesture configuration. So that's about it for the system adjustments. There are a few system specific ones. For example, for the PlayStation 4, Capcom adjusted the matchmaking system on the console to prioritise players of similar skill level and play history, so hopefully you'll have more balanced lobbies. And for Steam, they resolved an issue where mouse sensitivity would increase after the animation for exiting an area had completed when playing with a mouse and keyboard setup, as well as resolving an issue where the screen would shake vertically when controlling a security camera as the mastermind with mouse and keyboard. So there we have it, those are all the changes and adjustments that came with patch 1.06. As I said, I'm interested to see how this balances out the game, but I hope it's not too late. Like I said, I'm worried that the player pool has dwindled too much for this game to survive, but we'll have to wait and see. Hopefully though, like I said, this will balance things out and make for a more pleasant experience. But what are your thoughts? Leave a comment down below, and until next time, I've been Darcblade, bringing you a patch information video regarding patch 1.06 for Resident Evil Resistance. Hope you enjoyed the video, thanks for watching, subscribe and like for more.